The first time the black sedan came to Juniper Ridge, it came to take Clara Whitley's farm. 6 years later, the same sedan came back in low gear, rolling past ruined corn and dust-white fields. And the man inside did not come with a contract. He came to ask permission. That was the part nobody in Riley County ever forgot. Because in 1972, no one expected a 26-year-old woman with one hired hand, 3 old tractors, and 512 acres of tired Kansas ground to outlast the company buying everything around her. Not the bank, not her brothers, not the neighbors who had already signed, and certainly not the man from Continental Grain Systems, a man named Victor Marden, who treated family farms like small errors waiting to be corrected. Clara's father had died in March, just before the winter wheat turned silver green. He left her the farm, the mortgage, and 14 blue notebooks tied together with baling twine. Her brothers, Neil and Carver, received cash. Not much, but enough to make them feel lucky they had left for Topeka when they did. Clara got the land. And the land came with everything attached to it. The leaking machine shed, the well that groaned before dawn, the creek bottom that flooded every third spring, the red tractor with a starter that only worked if you knew exactly how to tap the housing, and the debt her father had been too proud to speak about until the end. The will was not sentimental. Her father had never been sentimental on paper. It simply said, "Clara stayed. Clara knows the farm." That sentence became the first thing people questioned. Victor Marden arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. His sedan was black, waxed, and too quiet for a gravel road. He wore a gray suit, a thin tie, and a gold watch that flashed every time he touched the briefcase on his lap. He sat at Clara's kitchen table as if he had already measured the room for removal. Continental had bought the Porter place, then the Bell pasture, then both Morton farms. Their white signs were already appearing along the county road, square and clean and identical, like headstones for families that were still alive. Marden opened his folder and showed Clara maps with colored blocks. "Your parcel sits in the middle of an efficiency zone," he said. Clara looked at the map. Her father's Northfield was blue. Her creek bottom was yellow. The orchard he planted after the drought of '56 was a pale green square, as if a lifetime could be reduced to printer ink. Marden smiled. "You are in a fortunate position, Miss Whitley. Most young women would not want to be buried under a property this complex." There it was. Not business yet, not numbers. First, the insult wrapped in concern. He talked about scale. He talked about improved seed. He talked about synchronized planting, centralized storage, chemical schedules, guaranteed purchase agreements, and how the future belonged to people who could stop treating a field like a family member and start treating it like an asset. Then he named the price. It was enough money to clear every note at the bank and leave Clara with more cash than she had ever seen in one place. Her brothers heard the number that night over the telephone and nearly shouted through the wires. "Take it," Neil said. "Dad was stubborn. You do not have to inherit his stubbornness." Carver was colder. "You are not saving a legacy. You are sitting on a bad investment and calling it love." Clara did not answer right away. She was standing at the kitchen window looking toward the east pasture where her father had once refused to plow under a strip of clover because, he said, soil needed a place to breathe. On the table behind her were the 14 blue notebooks. For 41 years, her father had written down what the land did when nobody important was looking. Rainfall by the week, soil texture by field, wind damage, worm counts, which corner held moisture, which slope warmed first, which crop failed after too much fertilizer, which patch recovered when he gave it a year in clover. The bank saw debt. Her brothers saw a burden. Marden saw an efficiency zone. Clara saw evidence. The next morning she told Victor Marden no. He did not get angry. That would have made him easier to understand. He only closed the folder, slipped the maps back into place, and gave her a patient little smile. "Then we will be neighbors," he said. "I hope you understand what that means." She did. Within a year, Continental owned the feed store, the seed dealership, and a controlling share of the elevator. The squeeze did not arrive like a storm. It arrived like paperwork. The first cut came in September. Clara hauled a truckload of Milo to the elevator her father had used since before she was born. The manager, old Frank Dutton, would not look at her directly. He kept tapping a pencil against the scale ticket. "New purchasing rules," he said. "Continental grain takes priority. Independent loads are deferred." "For how long?" Frank swallowed. "I cannot say." She drove 87 miles to sell that load. By the time fuel, time, and dockage came out, the profit looked like something a person could lose in a coat pocket. The second cut came when the red tractor threw a drive shaft 2 days before planting. The part had always been on the shelf in town. Suddenly it was unavailable. Not discontinued, not impossible, just unavailable to her. She found one in a salvage yard outside Salina, under a tarp full of wasps, and paid a man too much money because he knew exactly how badly she needed it. The third cut came from the bank. The letters started polite. Then they became clean and cold. Collateral review, operating exposure, risk profile. Phrases that sounded harmless until you realized they were how institutions sharpened a knife without showing the blade. By January, Clara's farm looked lonely from the road. Continental fields surrounded her on 3 sides, all of them flat, black, and prepared for the same spring crop. The fences were still there, but the county felt different. Less like neighbors, more like one machine with her farm caught in its teeth. That winter nearly broke her. One night, ice sealed the windows, and the power failed before supper. Clara sat at the kitchen table under a kerosene lamp with the bank's latest letter open in front of her. The farmhouse was so quiet she could hear the stove ticking as it cooled. For the first time, she wondered whether everyone else had been right. Maybe land could remember. Maybe fathers could teach. Maybe pride could sound exactly like wisdom until the bills came due. She reached for one of the blue notebooks, not because she expected an answer, but because it was the only voice in the house that did not want something from her. The notebook was from 1958. Her father had written about a dry year, a year when neighbors had pushed sorghum on every acre because the price was good. He had written about bare soil moving in the wind, about roots too shallow to hold ground, about fields that looked profitable right before they started leaving. Then one line stopped her. A field is not empty when it rests. It is repairing what the impatient man cannot see. Clara read it 3 times, and then the shape of the fight changed. Continental was not just bigger than her, it was more fragile than it looked. The company had one crop plan, one seed supplier, one chemical schedule, one purchasing chain, one idea of what success looked like. Their strength was uniformity. But uniform things break uniformly. Her father's notebooks were not memories, they were maps. By spring, while Continental's new planters moved across the county in straight, shining lines, Clara made her farm look almost ridiculous. She kept 80 acres in open-pollinated sorghum, seed she could save herself. She put 90 acres into alfalfa and clover, not because it paid quickly, but because nitrogen did not care about quarterly reports. She left strips of grass along the creek where her father had noted erosion after hard rain. She planted dry beans in the lower ground, potatoes in the darker creek soil, sunflowers on the ridge, squash near the windbreak, and tomatoes in 10 protected acres behind the orchard where the nights stayed warmer. From the road, it looked messy. From the notebooks, it made sense. Every field had a job. Some earned money. Some held water. Some fed the soil. Some broke pest cycles. Some gave her seed for the next year. Some gave insects a reason to stay where they belonged. Martin drove past once that June and slowed down long enough to stare. Clara knew what he saw. He saw inefficiency. That was fine. He was looking at a farm. She was building a system. Selling it was another war. The elevator was no longer reliable. The county buyers had Continental contracts, so Clara made a market the hard way, by getting in the truck before dawn and driving to Wichita with boxes of vegetables packed in damp towels and old newspaper. She entered restaurant kitchens through back doors. She waited beside dish sinks while chefs shouted over steam. Most of them dismissed her. A few tasted what she brought. Those few became the beginning. A tomato that still smelled like the sun could do what no sales pitch could. Beans that cooked creamy instead of chalky could open a door. Potatoes from creek-bottom soil could turn one handshake into a weekly rout. Then she found others like her, a dairy widow near Emporia, 2 brothers with apple trees outside Manhattan, a Mennonite family raising onions, a retired mechanic growing melons on 20 acres everyone else called useless. They met in a church basement that smelled of coffee and floor wax. They pooled enough cash to buy a used refrigerated truck with a dented side panel and a motor that smoked on hills. It was ugly. It was unreliable. It was theirs. That truck became a thin, silver line around Continental's chokehold. For 5 years, Clara did not win. She endured. A hailstorm stripped her tomatoes one July. Beetles chewed through half the beans the next. One autumn frost came early and turned the squash leaves black overnight. But no single disaster could finish her, because no single crop carried the farm. Her income came in pieces: restaurant checks, market stalls, a small seed order, potatoes sold through the co-op, hay traded for repair work. Little by little, the bank letters softened. The urgent phrases disappeared. Principle moved in the right direction. By her 32nd birthday, Clara paid off the operating note her father had left behind. She did not celebrate with champagne. She fixed the barn roof. But that evening, she walked to the ridge and looked across the continental ground. It was impressive, in the way a factory is impressive. Thousands of acres of the same corn hybrid, the same height, the same color, the same hunger. The company trucks came with fertilizer, then herbicide, then insecticide, more every season. The soil took on a pale, sealed look after rain, as if the fields had forgotten how to breathe. When the wind came hard out of the west, Clara could see topsoil lifting from continental land in sheets. A company could ignore a warning if it did not arrive on letterhead. The land did not use letterhead. In the summer of 1978, the bill arrived. At first, it was just talk at the co-op dock. A rust disease moving north. A fungus that liked heat and humid nights. A few counties hit hard. Then more. Continental's agronomists were confident. Their hybrid, C19, had been selected for high yield and broad resistance. They had data. They had forecasts. They had men with clipboards. What they did not have was variation. For efficiency, nearly every acre they controlled had been planted to the same genetic line on exhausted soil under the same chemical program. From a distance, it looked powerful. To a disease, it looked like an open door. The rust reached Riley County after a week of heavy air and no wind. It did not creep across Continental's fields. It ran. Green leaves streaked orange, then brown, then gray. Stalks weakened, ears failed to fill. By the second week, the fields looked scorched from the inside. Trucks moved frantically. Men argued at the field edges. Airplanes sprayed until the sky smelled bitter. Nothing held. Clara's sorghum took damage, but not collapse. Some rows suffered. Others stood clean. Her beans continued to flower. Her potatoes stayed under the soil, safe from the disease above. The alfalfa came back after cutting. The clover hummed with bees. Her tomatoes ripened red against a county turning brown. By August, people were parking along the road to look at the fence line. On one side, Continental's uniform field, brittle and dead-looking, the leaves curled like burned paper. On the other, Clara Whitley's farm, uneven and alive. The fence had become an argument nobody could talk over. Martin returned in September. The same black sedan came down the lane, but slower now. Dust clung to the doors. One hubcap was missing. Martin stepped out without the old polished speed. He looked older than 6 years should have made him. He did not bring the briefcase. Clara met him on the porch with soil under her nails. For a long moment he said nothing. His eyes moved over the alfalfa, the sorghum, the vegetable rows, the grass strips along the creek. He looked like a man reading a language he had mocked until he needed translation. "Miss Whitley," he said finally, "you have something we need." Clara waited. "Our fall contracts require acreage," he continued. "Cover acreage, winter grain, anything that can stabilize the ground. Our soil tests are poor. In some fields, frankly, alarming." He looked past her toward the ridge. "We would like to lease your south and creek bottom fields for one season. We will pay above market." There it was. 6 years earlier, he had told her the farm was a burden. Now he needed the burden to rescue the balance sheet. Clara felt no rush of triumph. That surprised her. She had imagined that moment on hard nights. She had pictured sharp words, a door closed in his face, a clean revenge. But standing there, she understood something her father had tried to teach without ever saying directly. Revenge is a short crop. Stewardship is the long one. "No," she said. Marden's jaw tightened. "I understand you may want a premium." "I said no to a lease," Clara replied. "A lease means your men make decisions on my land, your chemicals, your schedule, your shortcuts. That will not happen." His face shifted, not to anger, but to calculation. The old Marden was still in there, looking for a seam. Clara gave him none. "I will take a custom contract," she said. "My equipment, my seed, my methods. Winter rye, hairy vetch, and clover where the soil needs it. No burn-down chemicals, no deep plowing. Payment up front." Then she named the price. It was not cruel. It was not cheap. It was the price of being right for 6 years, while everyone else called it stubbornness. Marden did not negotiate. He signed at her kitchen table, under the same lamp where Clara had once read the bank letter and nearly surrendered. His gold watch flashed again as he wrote his name, but this time it looked small. Before he left, he asked the question that mattered. "How did you know?" Clara glanced at the blue notebooks on the shelf. "I did not know everything," she said. "I just knew better than to argue with the ground." Continental never fully recovered. The rust did not destroy the company in one season, but it exposed the weakness creditors had missed. Their yields fell. Their soil costs rose. Their locked supply chain became a trap. Within 3 years, the regional division was broken apart and sold in parcels. Some of that land went to farmers who had once signed because they thought there was no other way. Some came to Clara for advice. Not all listened. Enough did. Clara never became rich in the way her brothers had imagined money. She never moved to town. She never replaced the farmhouse with something grand. She kept the land at 512 acres, because enough was a number she trusted more than more. But the debt disappeared. The soil darkened. The creek banks held. The cooperative grew from one dented truck to a warehouse with 3 cold rooms and routes across the state. Years later, when Clara's hair had gone white, her granddaughter would find her in the south field after rain, kneeling with a handful of soil. Clara would break the clump open and show her the life inside it. Roots, worms, black crumbs that held together like cake. People will ask you what this land is worth, she would say. Do not answer too quickly. In the house, the 14 blue notebooks sat beside Clara's own. 50 years of weather and mistakes and repairs written in careful script. The company had kept contracts. The bank had kept records. Her brothers had kept opinions. But the land had kept the receipts. And in the end, the land was the only witness that mattered.